Melbourne Park, Australia. The stage for one of the biggest sporting experiments. This week the grounds have sat mostly empty, but tomorrow the stands will fill with thousands of fans. Crowds will be limited and cautious, but sport in front of spectators in an event on this scale hasn't been seen for many months.
It has definitely not yet been achieved in sport since the beginning of the pandemic in March last year.
It almost didn't happen at all, amid harsh lockdown and protracted negotiations between government and tennis officials.
Some people have accused us reasonably being dog-headed about it, but it's not. We would not do it unless it was safe.
And on the eve of the Open, another setback.
And the big news today, if you haven't heard, the Melbourne Summer Series shut down because of a case of COVID.
Victorian authorities have reintroduced coronavirus restrictions in a late-night press conference after an Australian Open hotel quarantine worker tested positive.
The most important thing is that we are onto this quickly.
A day of warm-up tennis was cancelled, forcing players to isolate and get tested. But the show must go on.
Are we absolutely confident the Australian Open is going to go ahead?
Hundreds of warm-up matches have been played in a major test of Tennis Australia's complex planning.
Is there anybody else that can produce those type of numbers?
What preceded this week was a logistical and public relations nightmare.
That was bound to happen.
16 days off, 3 days hitting, tennis match. My name's Tennis Australia and I'm so cool.
First time I've seen that, so I'm trying to ignore it, but
17 flights, many from coronavirus hotspots, carrying roughly 1,200 passengers arrived in Australia. The strict hotel quarantine system shocked many players.
It looks like you're in prison, huh?
It's the same.
Veteran sports writer Matt Futterman experienced firsthand the intricacies of hotel quarantine. He says he's still a bit shaken up.
Look, quarantine was really hard. It was 15 days, isolated in a hotel room, guard outside my door. But I say that with full understanding that what the people of Victoria and the people of Melbourne went through with a lockdown of more than 100 days, that was really hard too.
Melbourne Park will be divided into 3 zones based around the main arenas. To minimise risk, fans will have to stay within their ticketed zone with dedicated entrances to avoid overcrowding. From tomorrow, the world will be watching as up to 30,000 people come through the gates here every day. It's hard to imagine for a city that was in lockdown for months, but it's almost inconceivable for countries still in the grip of COVID-19. The tournament is an enormous undertaking, but there are more ambitious events to come in 2021. Despite public opposition, Japan is pressing ahead with the Tokyo Olympics in less than 6 months' time.
I mean, you're talking about tens of thousands of people, and I think it's logistically impossible to replicate what they've done here in Australia.
Athletes will have to submit itineraries and test regularly, but they won't have to quarantine in hotels like the Australian Open. While the Australian Open has cemented itself on the global sporting calendar, local success has been hard to come by. Great Expectations largely rests on the shoulders of 2 players, Nick Kyrgios and Ash Barty.
I think we've got a great group of guys coming through at the moment. I've grown up with these guys.
Australian Open wildcard Chris O'Connell has climbed the tennis ranks. Sitting outside the top 1,000 players, the 26-year-old is now on the cusp of breaking into the top 100 after a maiden win in a Grand Slam last year.
Game, set, match. O'Connell.
He says his Australian teammates have an advantage over their international competitors who have been stuck in hotel quarantine.
It's going to be pretty brutal for them to come out and compete at their best, but in saying that, they're top 100 players, so they're going to find a way to win, and it's still going to be very challenging.
With an uncertain year ahead, Matt Futterman says there'll be global interest in whether the tournament runs smoothly.
It's a glimpse into human behavior, into what is going to happen over the next year or two in places like England, where football is religion there, and people are dying not being able to go to the games. But are they going to rush back? And that's what we're all really interested to see.
If the Australian Open is successful, an even bigger challenge lies ahead for world sport, with the pandemic continuing to rage beyond Australia's shores. Tom Maddocks, ABC News, Melbourne.